Welcome to The Undercurrent, your source for grassroots news. I'm Lauren Windsor. On Wednesday, January 8th, Senators Bob Corker and Mark Warner participated in a panel on GSE reform sponsored by the Financial Services Roundtable. The two legislators have sponsored a bill that will eliminate Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the Federal Housing Finance Agency within 5 years of bill passage, thereby handing 30 to 40% of the mortgage market to Wall Street and tightening access to credit. This would have a significant negative impact on the ability of low to middle income families to buy homes. Warner, a Democrat, worried that the administration, consumer rights advocates, and others would push the bill too far to the left.
What I believe, and I say this as a Democrat, what the administration and the chairman and the others have to resist is trying in the Senate to move the bill too much to the left so they'll have an ability to kind of then counteract the House's view, which will be to the right. Because if we, there may be some movement on this legislation, but we've got I think, a very strong bipartisan coalition and a lot of other members on the Banking Committee and a lot of other members in the Senate who are very interested in joining this effort as long as it stays kind of in the center. And one of my concerns would be if there's too much of an effort to move it to kind of too far to the left to counteract entering on the right, whereas I think if we keep it down the center, keep it strong bipartisan, come out with a really strong vote, we're still going to end up at the same spot with a lot less angst at the end of the day.
Warner later urged consumer rights advocates, and especially consumer rights advocates, not bankers, not to let this opportunity pass them by.
I make this to all of you in the room as industry, as advocates, particularly those who fall on the consumer side and the advocates for low and moderate income housing. Push, advocate, but the alternative of the status quo, or the alternative of, I say to more of my friends on the advocacy side, of a House approach is, and who knows what the future holds politically for what the Congress may look like in another session or so. Let's not lose this opportunity. We've got, I think, a fairly good starting point here, and again, I just would leave you with that old adage of, the perfect is the enemy of the good, and this is clearly a place where that's the case.
Later in the day, I got the lowdown on mortgage market reform with housing rights advocates John Taylor and Mitria Wilson of the National Community Reinvestment Coalition.
Corker-Warner's bill eliminates, it doesn't modify it, eliminates the affordable housing goals of Fannie and Freddie. So when the Wall Street firms take over, they won't have the same obligation that the government-sponsored enterprises do. So if they want to just make loans, mortgages to middle-income and upper-income people, that's fine. If they want to not worry about whether working-class people are getting mortgages, that's fine too, because there won't be any obligation for those enterprises to have to fulfill a goal of making sure that working-class people have an opportunity to become homeowners.
I think it's kind of like a modern Marie Antoinette sort of scenario where it's like instead
of let them eat cake,
it's let them rent. Let them rent.
Bernanke wrote a speech after this crisis in which he basically said, we really need to accept the fact that there's just a lot of people who shouldn't be homeowners, they should be renters, and that's when I was saying let them eat rent.
So Mitria, what do you see as the way forward? How do we remedy the crisis? How do we solve it?
How do we solve the crisis?
I know you have the solution.
Well, if I did, I'd call Senator Corker in the morning. That's right, I'd tell you.
Is there a bill, though, that's out there that's being proposed that you think really has some solid?
You know what, I think there isn't. No. And I think one of the things that we've been doing at NCRC is we've really been very adamant with members of Congress, and particularly the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, Senator Johnson, and the ranking member, Senator Crapo, to actually take the time to enact responsible legislation about the future of housing finance. One thing is, I think you can't do a piecemeal approach. That is, if you're going to address the GSEs, then you have to also look at what role FHA plays in that. You have to look at all of the other standards. You have to actually allow the market to actually settle and take place and see what happens as a result of Dodd-Frank's enactments and the qualified mortgage rule and the qualified residential mortgage rule. There are a lot of changes that have been put into place that make the market much safer that are just now going to take effect in this year, in fact next week. Right? So I think one of the things is to see what happens around those things. And John always says that we're rushing to judgment. Everybody's in a hurry. And he's right, particularly with GSE reform. We're in a hurry, and we know that we had a financial crisis, and our response to that is to say, well, you know what, we just don't need Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac.
Well, they're scapegoating.
Right.
So that they don't have to make real reforms, like substantive reforms to Wall Street.
But the reality is that the middle class in this country has been largely built upon the concept of home ownership, and there is nothing. There's no 401k. There's no, pension plan that can take the place of that wealth-generating mechanism or savings mechanism.
And no one has contributed more to that, as far as institutions are concerned, than Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Bottom line, when people like Mark Warner talk about centrism, it's shorthand for kowtowing to moneyed interests. In this particular case, that's the big banks. To Senator Warner, a warning. Progressive is the enemy of the gutless.
Under the surface makes the mainstream get so nervous. It's time for purpose, for news to serve us, not with propaganda they use.